In the fall of 1970, guitarist Roger Fisher, bass player Steve Fossen, and brand new lead singer Ann Wilson set off on an 8-month tour playing clubs all over the Pacific Northwest. That tour was where Ann discovered the magic of her own voice.
We were playing along, doing a song that we do every night, and all of a sudden, I hear something. I look over at her, and she's just cutting loose. And man, it was really exciting. At that moment, I knew she was a star.
I hit pay dirt inside my own soul, and it felt good. I hit some kind of a resonance with that type of singing.
Ann soon hit pay dirt in her personal life as well. At a gig in upstate Washington, Roger Fisher's brother Michael, who was evading the Vietnam draft in Vancouver, Canada, snuck across the border to see his little brother's band. And Ann fell hopelessly head over heels in love.
I was sitting there on the dance floor with a glass of Loganberry wine in front of me and a big cigarette. And in comes Michael and to visit his brother and see the band that he'd heard so much about. And he and I just looked at each other and never stopped looking, basically. I mean, it was just one look, really. It was pretty amazing.
Michael's outlaw status made visiting Ann dangerous, but love would not be denied. Within 6 months, Ann quit the band and moved to Vancouver to be with him.
All the components for romance were in place. It was springtime in Vancouver, and his property had a little stream running through it, and it was very bucolic and private, and so we could sleep outside sometimes, and we could run around with hardly any clothes on. It was very idyllic. I can't think of a more perfect way to be in love for the first time.
Before long, Steve Fossen and Roger Fisher followed Ann to Vancouver, and the band was back in business. Michael Fisher became their first manager and the inspiration for Heart's signature song.
Cold rain night so long ago, when I was not so strong. Little man came to me, never seen eyes so blue.
Magic Man was totally written about Michael Fisher. He was the Magic Man, you know, everything in that song is autobiographical. Because my mother was, at the time, calling me up going, boy, you sure left the house quick, you know. What's going on up there?
Oh, come on home, girl, mama cried on the phone. Too soon, my baby and my girl should be at home. But try to understand, try to understand, try to understand. He's a magic man, mama.
The phone call wasn't quite like that, but the whole feel of it was she was gone. But she apparently saw that in me and put that in, as Mama says.
During the next 2 years, Heart established themselves as the best band in Vancouver. But for Ann, something was missing, and that something was her sister Nancy, who had gone off to college in Oregon. Ann couldn't imagine going ahead without Nancy.
Ann and I were always going to end up playing in a band together. I just felt in my soul, really, that I needed to hold that off and experience life without Ann for a little bit so that I'd have more to bring to the table when I came back. Because I felt almost sometimes invisible, you know.
But I always had put pressure on her. Come on, just come up and visit. Just sit in. You don't have to join. We can write songs together. We can jam, you know. I couldn't let it drop.
When Heart was offered a deal with a small indie label, Mushroom Records, in January of 1975, Nancy finally agreed to leave college and join the group. But no one guessed what would happen next.
Roger was after me from the word go.
He just made a beeline for Nancy and worked on her and worked on her and worked on her.
I'd been really in love with her for a long time. And then one night, I walked her to the car, and she kissed me. And that was it. That was amazing.
I just sort of caved in, you know? I caved in. Plus, by the time I was, 19 when I joined, you know, I was ready for a little action.
And for the next 4 years, the two Wilson sisters and the two Fisher brothers were one big happy family, and the very heartbeat of what was about to become one of the top rock and roll bands in the world.
I thought that was one of the reasons that the band was, their ambition was not to be denied, because they had all those powerful people really wanting to do it.
People would look at us and they would go, oh, yeah, right, two sisters who were with two brothers, you know, is this real or is it some kind of a antic? And it was real. It was definitely real.
Oh, Annie, dreamboat Annie, ship of dreams.
Heart spent a year making their first record, Dreamboat Annie, and during that time finalized their lineup, adding a second guitarist, Howard Leese, and drummer Mike DeRosier. But when the record came out, it looked like Dreamboat Annie just might sink without a trace.
It wasn't really catching on. Nothing was happening, and we were just, it was a very difficult time. We were going, what's wrong? What's wrong? This is not supposed to happen this way. And it was real scary for a little while.
The low point was at a dinner club in northern Canada, where Hart was fired 4 nights into a 2-week gig, after Ann joked on stage that the club's food tasted like Lysol. The band was about to get even by setting fire to their dressing room when their entire world turned around.
Our manager came down and said, well, I got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is you just got fired. Yeah, we're all just real happy about that. And the good news is you're going to open up for Rod Stewart in 4 days.
Here we are 1 minute, you know, burning up this stupid dressing room in this stupid Lysol club, being fired. And then the next minute, we're on a train to Montreal, heading on the Glory train. We're on the Glory train, heading for the Glory gig of all time.
Heading out this morning into the sun.
What the band didn't know was that Montreal radio had been playing Dreamboat Annie. And when they walked out onto that big stage for the first time, the audience already knew their songs.
We came out to a house full of lit matches. And I remember everybody just kind of got choked up in the band. You know, we all kind of went, whoa.
And I just remember just being goosebumps from head to toe the whole night. And after every song, we got a big rounding cheer and applause, and it just felt so good.
By the end of 1976, Dreamboat Annie had sold over 1 million copies. And for a brief moment, everything was perfect. But all that changed right after Christmas. The band had recorded the first 4 tracks for their second album, Magazine, when Ann and Nancy opened up an issue of Rolling Stone and saw a tabloid-style ad placed by their label, Mushroom Records, in a disastrously unsuccessful publicity stunt.
The headline was, "It was only our first time." And of course the meaning was we were lesbian lovers, you know, sister lesbian lovers.
We got our knickers in a big twist about it, and we just pitched a fit, you know, and fired everybody.
But in firing the record label, Ann and Nancy started a war. Mushroom took the 4 rough tracks, added in some live performances, and threatened to release Magazine without the band's consent.
We spent a year making the first record, and this is just a couple of weeks' work, a couple of weeks into the record, and you're going to release it as a finished record? I don't think so.
It just was a big mushroom cloud. It was massive. And they took us to court, threatened to get a court injunction against us working at all.
The legal battle with Mushroom would last 2 years, but Hart was anxious to work again. They signed a new contract with Epic Records, and in July 1977, they released their second album, Little Queen.
That should have been one record, the combination of Magazine and Little Queen. And it would have been a very great album, very important record for sure.